All right, y'all, welcome to the Scott Horton Show. I'm the director of the Libertarian Institute, editorial director of antiwar.com, author of the book Fool's Errand, Time to End the War in Afghanistan, and the brand new Enough Already, Time to End the War on Terrorism. And I've recorded more than 5,500 interviews since 2003, almost all on foreign policy, and all available for you at scotthorton.org. You can sign up for the podcast feed there, and the full interview archive is also available at youtube.com/Scott Horton Show. Okay, guys, on the line, I've got Cato Institute Senior Fellow Doug Bandow, and of course, he writes for us at antiwar.com, and here he is in the American Conservative magazine. That's theamericanconservative.com. Joe Biden grovels to the Saudis. Oh, say it ain't so, Doug. He wouldn't do anything like that. America's the empire and Saudi Arabia is the client state. I read that in a magazine somewhere.
Yeah, you would think that. I mean, you look at the countries, you'd think the U.S. was a superpower and would be the one that would kind of order the Saudis around, but it turns out it's the other way around.
Yeah, it's funny that. It's just the energy, but you know what? We don't even import that much oil from the Saudis, do we?
No, one of the great things with fracking and other energy developments has been that the U.S. has become a major energy exporter. The Saudis provide more oil to the Chinese, at least they did until the Chinese started buying a lot of Russian oil, and the Europeans. So the question is, why should we protect oil for China? It's a very strange idea that you would think after all these years, finally, we could say we don't have to suck up to the Saudis anymore. But it turns out this president kind of went the whole way, his little fist bump plus begging for oil, which came to naught. I mean, the Saudis treated him with contempt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, before they wouldn't even take his phone call. And then you say here, they didn't even greet him with a red carpet kind of treatment when he landed. The president of the world empire, he got, the mayor came out?
Exactly, or governor. I think it was the governor of the province.
Mm-hmm.
And then when he
Which
talked
that's,
about
wait, pardon me, but in diplomatic language, that's a serious, deliberate F-you to the president of the United States, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, when this is supposed to be your most important ally and you don't send the king, you don't send the son. I mean, this is downscale. This is,
even the foreign minister,
That's right. You can catch a taxi to the conference center.
Seriously. All right. I'm sorry. So go ahead, because I interrupted your train of thought, but I just wanted to zoom in on that one point, because that's really something.
One of the other points was the president tried to assure everybody, oh, don't worry. I told him how upset I was about, the murder and dismemberment of Jamal Khashoggi. And the Saudi foreign minister said, well, I didn't hear that. Calling the president a liar. And of course, we know the president does have a problem remembering things that never happened. Yeah, and then MBS, good old slice and dice himself, criticized the U.S. energy program and all the green energy and, climate change and stuff. So he's out there trashing the president's energy program. I mean, it's quite extraordinary.
In other words, he's saying, oh, if you're complaining that the price of energy is so high, then forget Saudi Arabia. Why don't you just pump your own damn oil? That's essentially what he's saying.
Yeah, this is your problem. I mean, you've done this. Don't blame us.
Yeah. And by the way, you talk about Crown Prince Bonesaw here, as I like to call him, slice and dice. I like that. Yeah, this guy's one hell of a cold-blooded murder, but he's still only, 35 or something? 37? He's going to be the king of Saudi Arabia until the CIA kills him someday or something, right?
Oh, that's right, or unless one of his in-laws or somebody does it. I mean, an awful lot of members of the royal family don't like him, but I assume he has some pretty good security around him. I mean, he's a tough one. The old system, you kind of shared power with all the brothers and everybody got a piece of the action. And this one, it's like, oh boy, you better not cross this guy. The former crown prince, his cousin, is apparently under house arrest and nobody sees him. We actually don't even know whether he's really alive. Then he went off on some foreign trip and he took along the son of his cousin, who had to kind of show the faith and we support the crown prince. I mean, it's brutal that he did that with Jamal Khashoggi. I mean, he chops up Khashoggi and then brings in Khashoggi's kids. Oh, it's so sad what happened to your father. Oh, I have my condolences. I mean, what a ruthless, cold-blooded guy.
Yeah. Speaking of ruthless and cold-blooded, did you see the Washington Post then had a thing about, Khashoggi's wife says that he would want the U.S. to forgive Mohammed bin Salman for this. and to not let it, spoil our wonderful relationship.
Exactly.
That's amazing. Uh, they just have no qualms about putting something like that out there. And by the way, when I say Washington Post, that's not, in this case, just interchangeable with the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times. This is the paper that Khashoggi wrote for, spinning for the Crown Prince what murdered him.
That's right.
It's just incredible to see. God dang. Shocking, but not surprising, but still shocking. That's my disorder, Doug. I think maybe you got the same thing as me. It's still shocking enough to keep you motivated to keep complaining about it, even though you're never really surprised that they would do such things. But boy, they do continue to do such things,
Well, it's shocking, but not surprising. That's really the terrible aspect of it. Is that these days I still occasionally there is some shock involved, but it never surprises me. It's just, oh wow. I mean, we're doing a little extra today. That the notion that you turn your kind of consulate into a killing field. I mean, it really is quite extraordinary. I'm sure he's not the first person who's been killed in somebody's consulate. But they're just something. So, they used the brother of the Crown Prince, another one of the princes, who was then ambassador to the United States, to assure Khashoggi, oh, yes, everything will be fine. Just go to the consulate. We'll get the paperwork done about his divorce. And then he could marry. Oh, yeah, no, everything will be fine. I mean, it's just, these guys are just, Americans don't get them. I mean, even our cold-blooded people, they believe in killing, like ordering the U.S. military to bomb another country, but they don't have their own hands on it. This is one where there's an individual who and you're quite clear, just plan it all out and take the guy out. I mean, it's wild stuff.
Yeah. All right. Now, you quote all the human rights groups and so forth here, talking about the oppression of the Shiite minority and I guess of women and political dissidents of all kinds and that kinds of thing. You have the morality police, just like in Iran and that kind of deal. Can you describe the degree of police state there?
Well, what's happened here, it's kind of a twofold thing. And he has some support from young people because what he's been doing is dismantling the religious stuff. That is, women can drive now. They have greater economic opportunities. They've had concerts. That you can go to movie theaters. And for the most part, the religious police don't show up and arrest you anymore. So there's that sense of a cultural relaxation while he's doubled down on political tyranny. So the women who are out there advocating to be able to drive, he's thrown in prison and had tortured. They've taken bloggers and put them in jail, not because they criticized him, but because they didn't praise him. So it's not enough to just, not say anything. If you're not out there kind of sucking up to him all the time, then you'll end up in jail. And what's important here is that, there's a tendency, because Khashoggi was known in Washington, everybody focuses on him. And that's understandable. I mean, I had lunch with him. I was on a panel with him. I mean, he was a good guy. But the point is, the oppression goes so much broader. I mean, other royals have been kidnapped from abroad and brought in. They've been set in prison. You never see them again, like his cousin. Mm-hmm. So this is a thoroughgoing oppressive place. If you look at Freedom House ratings, they come in worse than China and worse than Russia. I mean, they're down kind of getting close to North Korean territory. This is a really bad place when it comes to any sense of political freedom, civil liberties, freedom of expression, freedom of religion. I mean, there's not a single synagogue or church or temple there. I mean, this is a very bad place, and it's kind of off the charts. Yet, the president said, "Well, if it happens again, I'll tell them that I'll complain." Well, but that really threatens them. That makes them really worried.
Yeah. When you read stuff about, they take this Shiite dissident and they cut his head off and then they string up and crucify, essentially, or maybe quite literally crucify his headless corpse to make an example out of him and stuff like that. It sounds like war propaganda that I would not believe if it was being deployed against any enemy of the United States. If you told me the Ayatollah in Iran did that, I mean, I know he hangs people from their neck a lot, so right. I would say, okay, I'm willing to see your evidence, but I would not just believe it since I know America hates the Ayatollah so much. But in this case, these are our guys. And it's like, yeah. In fact, you have this quote here. I almost can't believe it, but I can. At least 89 U.S. persons or their family members were detained, disappeared, or under travel bans at some point in 2021 in Saudi Arabia. And under travel bans means house arrest, essentially, then, right?
That's right. Especially they can't leave the country. I mean, a number of these are spouses. America. Say if you're an American woman and you marry a Saudi Arabian man, you go over there. I mean, you become essentially his property. So the point is, if you want to divorce, if you want to take the kids, too bad. I mean, no way. And there have been a number who have been, kind of inculcated some American style values in terms of freedom of speech and whatnot. If you say any of that stuff, you end up in jail. You end up, at the very least under house arrest. You can't ever leave. And, these are American citizens. And again, this is one where if the president was really concerned about human rights, at the very least, he could say, well, if you want us to defend you, by the way, maybe we should get some of these people out. That what to me is extraordinary is this. It's kind of like an iceberg. Above the water is Jamal Khashoggi. Extraordinary, incredible public attention, et cetera. And below that is this massive oppression, which gets very little attention internationally.
Yeah. Sorry, hang on just 1 second. Hey, y'all, Scott Horton here for Tennessee Hot Sauce Company. Man, this stuff is so good. They get all different flavors. Garlic habanero, honey habanero, pineapple habanero, poblano jalapeno, and the blood orange ghost. They're all so good, I swear. And for a limited time, Tennessee Hot Sauce Company is featuring official Scott Horton Hotter Than the Sun thermonuclear hot sauce. It's full of Carolina Reapers, scorpion peppers, Dr. Pepper, hydrogen isotopes, and all kinds of things that'll burn your tongue clean off. Seriously, it's really good. Get yourself a hot sauce subscription. Spend $40 or more and use promo code SCOTT to get a free bottle of Hotter Than the Sun hot sauce. That's tnhotsauceco.com. Hey, y'all got to check out these awesome busts of our hero, the great Ron Paul. They're made by the renowned sculptor Rick Casali. They're 13 inches tall, hand-painted bronze resin based on Casali's brilliant original. Y'all may have seen mine in the background on my bookshelf in some recent interviews. The thing is unbelievable. Check out this incredible piece of art at rickcasali.com/Ron Paul, and you'll see what I mean. Use promo code Horton and you'll save $25, and this show will get a little kickback too. That's rickcasali.com/Ron Paul. Casali is Casali. rickcasali.com/Ron Paul. And there's free shipping too. Well, it's funny. I mean, there were a couple of memes like this, but for the most part, it went unnoticed and unremarked that the difference between the Saudis and ISIS, which they sponsored in Syria, was, and in Western Iraq, was that ISIS wore black and the Saudis wear white. But here they are. It's the exact same pose as they cut some guy's head off, as they, the only other people, it is, again, it sounds like crazy war propaganda, but it's true. When the head of antiquities in Palmyra, Syria, they cut his head off and strung his corpse up on the traffic light. The only other place in the world you can find that going on is in Riyadh.
That's right. And, ISIS used Saudi Arabian textbooks in their schools. That was the closest they could find of stuff that was available to teach their students. The Saudis have cleaned up some of that under, extraordinary international pressure. But for years, the reason we have people like the ISIS people is around the world, including in the U.S., the Saudis spread absolute hate material in madrasas all over the world. That, basically, you hate the other is inferior, et cetera. Really awful stuff. That's kind of the precursor to terrorism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially during that time in the Saudi and American intervention in Syria, I remember Patrick Coburn talking about some of these preachers in Saudi who were really being amplified by their government, who were preaching, what we would recognize as Nazi-type rhetoric against Shiites especially. And that this is it. This is the end of the world. We got to kill all the Shiites, this kind of stuff. And it's being promoted, at full volume by the government of Saudi at that time to radicalize people, to send them off for the war, for Obama's dirty war.
Yep.
So, and now that's the promise of this guy, right? Doug, I remember reading a thing about how the CIA was kind of complaining that they liked Mohammed bin Zayed, the cousin who was the crown prince who MBS overthrew. Yes. And they said, we like this guy. He worked with us against Al-Qaeda, which I thought must have been a mistake, maybe an editor's mistake. They must have meant to help us support Al Qaeda all over the Middle East as we do. But whatever it was, now they're kind of stuck with this guy. And of course, they got us fighting on Al Qaeda's side in Yemen, but less so in Syria now, fighting just more on the side of the Kurdish leftists there, I think. Well, no, it's still our friends the Turks are protecting Al Qaeda in Idlib province. I don't know how much Saudi has to do with that anymore, but I guess I wonder what you think about, compared to his predecessor, what is MBS's overall strategy or tactics in using these Al Qaeda suicide bomber types, as Obama did and as they all did in Syria and really in Libya before that in the Obama years, going forward here? Do you think there's much more danger of that?
Well, it looks to me like MBS is to some degree tired of foreign adventures. I mean, I don't see much evidence he's doing much in Syria these days. It seems like they've kind of given that one up. I mean, they're actually having discussions with the Iranians. There's been a lot of discussions between actually Syrian government and UAE, which the U.S. has tried to get in the way of. And the Saudis, so it looks to me like he's not, I mean, he clearly wants out of Yemen, but doesn't want to kind of allow the Houthis to have complete control. But he seems to have realized this has been an utter catastrophe. So my sense is that he is looking a bit more domestic. He's trying to figure out an economy that's not based on oil. He's got some of these massive development plans, which, strike me, they could go very, very bad, but nevertheless seems to have his focus. He's playing a little bit more with the Chinese, trying to get more Chinese money in. So it looks to me like he's gone through this period where he just recognizes all those military adventures really are not helpful, and is kind of walking away from those. I mean, he'll certainly use any group that he can for his own purposes, but it looks to me like he has really stepped away from a lot of that stuff and is focusing a bit more. Part of it, I think, is trying to ensure his control. I mean, his dad is not in good shape. I mean, the presumption is, the king is not going to be around, for an awful lot more. So he wants to take over, not have problems at home. Very young population, jobs matter, trying to satisfy that population matters. So I think he's got a somewhat different agenda to the future than the folks in the past.
Yeah. And now, as far as climbing down on Yemen, I wonder if do you know if there's any talk really between him and Biden on this trip about what are they going to do in Yemen here? They have a ceasefire, which, as Hassan al-Tayyab is saying, looks like it might fall apart right now if we don't get the Congress to get the president to get MBS to finally climb down from this thing. Obviously, they can't win the war. At the same time, they haven't lost. It's not like the Houthis are taking Riyadh. So how about time out and call it quits for real? Can we do it?
Well, that would make a lot of sense, but this administration doesn't seem to get that. I mean, I think part of the problem here is this administration, for reasons that are almost unfathomable, has essentially taken the Trump position towards Iran. And part of the Trump position towards Iran is the Houthis are tools of Iran. The Saudis are fighting the Iranians by being in Yemen. Therefore, we can't simply demand that the Saudis leave Yemen because that would turn it all over to Iran. I mean, all of this, of course, is crap. That the reason the Iranians are active is because the Saudis were dumb enough to start a war with the Houthis, which gave the Houthis an all-ascent opportunity to bleed Saudi Arabia dry. But I mean, I hear that all the time from some of the right-wing think tanks. Oh, the Houthis, it's all Iran. I mean, that's the way they do everything. Oh, we have to stay in Iraq because of Iran. I mean, they act as if Iran is the superpower, and if we leave one area kind of open, they'll take it over and the world will end. And I think that's the problem here. The Biden administration seems to treat Yemen as simply another front in dealing with Iran, and of course, they're fully prepared to let the JCPOA go. They're making the same statements that we're prepared to use military force. They're promising to, make sure there will never be a nuclear weapon. They're over there, in Israel, kind of, cuddling up and saying we all agree on this in terms of nuclear weapons. I mean, it's very sad where he could have come in and returned the U.S., had minimal political problems, had done it, gotten it over, and moved on, and instead, we could end up in a war with Iran in the next year or two.
Yeah, it's just incredible. And, it's got to be mentioned, too, as I know most of this audience already knows, but maybe some people don't. It ain't just the USA. It's this guy, Joe Biden, who was the third most important man in the United States of America in terms of getting us into Iraq War II. You know, I mean, you could say Paul Wolfowitz maybe was tied for third place, but it was George Bush, Dick Cheney, and Joe Biden, the leader of the Foreign Relations Committee in the U.S. Senate, when the U.S. Senate was controlled by the opposition party, the upper house in the hands of the opposition party. And the leader of the Foreign Relations Committee was Cheney's whip, Bush and Cheney's whip against the rest of the Democrats to make sure they voted for the war when he could have stopped it if he tried. And then what did that mean? That means he's the guy who handed Baghdad over to Iran's best friends. And then he was vice president under Obama when Obama tried to get rid of Assad, but ended up making the government in Syria more dependent on Iran than ever before. And then, as you just said, same for the Houthis too. By even having this war, they've only empowered Iran in the Arabian Peninsula more than they ever were before, and gave them a great way to help weaken Saudi Arabia by turning them to their southwest instead of their northeast, where Persia lies this whole time. And so whose fault is it all? It's all Joe Biden's fault the whole time. The only time he wasn't in charge of this policy was when Trump was in power, but the policy never changed the whole time for that 4 years. So same difference. So he's in no position to have any of these policies based on the danger of Iranian power and influence in the region when it's literally his individual fault, you know?
Yep, that's exactly right.
God dang, I can't believe Joe Biden's the president. I used to say that about Trump. Can't believe Donald Trump is the president. Now I'm like, I can't believe Joe Biden's the president.
The best and brightest America chooses for its leader. It's quite extraordinary. It's just so embarrassing. I travel around the world and I can't explain it to anybody.
Right. Yeah, no, what are you supposed to say? Well, it's not up to us. Okay.
Don't worry, Kamala Harris is vice president, and then, boy, Nancy Pelosi's really on the ball, and she's House Speaker. You know, you're just like, you want to run screaming from the room.
Yeah, seriously. Well, their best idea is they want Gavin Newsom to run for president. I guess he's going to run on 1 million people fled California while he was the governor of it for their dear lives.
That's right.
He's going to do that for the rest of us. I can't wait. He's got nice hair, though.
He does.
Yeah. All right, Doug Bandow, you're awesome. Thank you so much for all your great articles and your time on the show again.
Absolutely. You have a good one.
You too. The Scott Horton Show, Anti-War Radio, can be heard on KPFK 90.7 FM in LA, APSradio.com, antiwar.com, scotthorton.org, and libertarianinstitute.org.